The streaming era has completely changed the way that we listen to music, and it's very interesting because if you break it down, let's say from the fans' perspective, there's different effects there. If you look at it from the musician's, position, it's very different there. And then when you look at it from, the record label's position and the ones who are, running the show in the background, they're in a completely different position than everyone. And what's interesting about the streaming era too is that I feel as if at the moment it has currently changed the way I listen to music drastically than the way I was coming up back then, listening through CD format. And I could just imagine how weird it is for people that were bumping only vinyl back then or cassettes. So, having this conversation about streaming is very interesting, but let's go into IFPI's global music report that came out on March 22nd, 2022. And this report claims that the worldwide music industry generated $25.9 billion in 2021. 65% of that total revenue came from streaming platform earnings. So, we understand the weight of the streaming era. We understand how reliant, everyone is on it, especially for consumption, creation, and business. So where do you see this conversation going? Because it's obviously not affecting the business. It's not killing the money. But do you think that it's having a certain effect on music quality at this point?
100%. And it's just crazy to see how dominant streaming platforms have been. I mean, take it back to 2014, and then streaming service revenue finally eclipsed CD sales. In 2015, streaming revenue became more dominant than the revenue that was being generated from digital downloads. And every year since then, streaming has been bringing in billions of dollars into the music industry, and it's now become the most popular format for our music consumption. So the question becomes, is it actually changing the way that we listen to music, which I think it definitely has? And more than that, is it killing the quality of music? So I want to kind of jump into that, because what's interesting about the way that the streaming platforms work is the fact that producers, writers, artists themselves only get paid for one stream if a listener listens for more than 30 seconds of that song.
That's crazy.
So what's interesting about this is that now artists have to tackle their song creation a bit differently, because they have to make sure they're doing everything in their power to hook that listener within the first 30 seconds. And I've noticed a couple of changes in effect of that. And first of all, you're going to find that a lot of hooks are being provided right away. There's also less buildups for the instrumentals within that first 30 seconds. There's maybe drops of F-bombs or some shocking lyrics to really captivate you right away. And it's really altering song structure and music creation as a whole. So how do you feel about that? Do you feel like it's a good thing? Like, what's your take on that?
Okay, it's interesting because I don't feel as if it's a bad thing, because that's just the way it's going to go. I mean, there's obviously different formats for different eras in music, and I think it almost also helps with the accessibility factor of it, and I think that's why so many people, are starting to gravitate towards more music, and it's such a popular format at the moment. Well, it always has fucking been, but I mean, you can understand why people are getting hooked, but I also think it's because of attention spans. And example, all right, back then, like, I had no, and I'm going to take this to film. I had no problem sitting through a 3-hour movie and watching it, but now I almost feel as if an hour and 20 minutes is too much for me. And I have that same sentiment with a song. Like, if a new song drops in 2022, first of all, I don't think you see it anymore, because no one writes 3 verses. You only really see like those songs hitting those like moments when either like, they're on the outro or whatever it is, but they don't necessarily enter my rotation as much.
Yeah.
Where in contrast, I find some of the best projects in rap right now are the ones that are being made with simplicity and I would say precision and timing. So example, take it back to 2021 with Vince Staples' Self-Titled. That was a super short, digestible listen that stayed within my rotation all year. So I don't think it's killing the sounds. I think it's just changing the way that we're looking at it. So when looking at that, do you feel okay, let's say, sacrificing like runtime for accessibility? And, do you understand why maybe people are gravitating more towards this format?
Yeah, it just sucks to know that it's like artists are now catering to the algorithm rather than their own creative ambitions for the most part, because let's look at it.
It's tough.
Look, let's look at it this way. Okay, I took a couple of examples of hit songs from the last couple of years. For example, What's Poppin' from Jack Harlow, 6 times platinum, and it's only 2 minutes and 19 seconds, and it immediately starts off with the hook. That's the first thing you hear, okay? Now let's bring it to Pushin P, which has over 140 million streams, one of the biggest songs to have come out this year, and you hear every layer of the beat, the entire progression of the beat within that first 30 seconds. You hear Gunna and Future within that first 30 seconds, providing the hook. So it's pretty much a game of like, let me fill in the most entertainment value I can within that first 30 seconds. And then you also have the side of the shock value for a song like WAP, where you have a sample that starts the song off saying there's some hoes in this house. Then you have Cardi B with some super controversial lyrics.
I know where you're going with this. I get the whole conversation.
It's more of a game of how to tap into the listener and grab them rather than like, let me have some instrumental buildup. Let me have a piano riff, lead me into the song.
Everyone's going to create their music differently. Like, I think that if you really want to stick it to it, yes, obviously there's people that are making commercially successful formatted music, but I feel as if that also represents a small percentile of what's actually going on.
Not mainstream music outputs. I don't think so.
I do think so. Because example, like you still have like some really solid rap songs that are coming out that are really good. And
in the mainstream though?
In the mainstream, like, well, I've seen, let's example, like, you had a couple of songs on Donda in there, like, bro, like something like, let's say not Jesus Walks, my God, Jesus Lord. My bad, guys. Or something like Champagne Poetry that came out last year. Like, there was certain mainstream tracks that did have that value for me. But that's not what I'm expecting out of the mainstream. I'm really enjoying and I'm really liking how the underground is approaching, let's say the algorithm in quotations, because there's still projects that are being dropped this year that are algorithm friendly, but that, sustain the music quality. Example, Saba had a great run with Few Good Things, and for his streaming numbers, it was extremely impressive. Like, I don't know his chart position exactly on Apple Music, but I remember seeing some facts, and I'm like, wow, like, that's interesting, like, especially a guy that, built up independently. Someone like, let's say, Benny the Butcher, had something like, let's say, Johnny P's Caddy that charted. Like, it was nice. But
that music is not selling the same way that...
It's not selling the same
as the actual chart toppers, and that's what I'm talking about.
But I mean, like, the chart toppers have always had a format, though. Example, like,
not necessarily.
Bro, going back then, okay, the people who were dominating the charts back then, I don't know, let's say like fucking Justin Timberlake, bro, or like let's say like Britney Spears. Let's say the people that were in this position now that a lot of rappers are in, they were making pop-friendly formatted music for the radio to be able to get there. So this has always been a thing. I just feel as if now, instead of having to concentrate on certain formats that were being used back then, there's a new perspective that's, coming into play. But let's go on to the music fans, because how do you feel as a fan about getting this new formatted music, and how has it affected your music listening experience as a whole?
Well, listen, another crazy fact is that 50% of music consumption on Spotify is being done through playlists. So people are really preferring the playlist format instead of the album format. And now artists are, let's say curating some of their projects to have that ability to, okay, let me make these listeners pluck out songs rather than enjoy these albums and place them for, let's say, a storytelling vehicle where there's a narrative from start to finish. So I'm not a big fan of that, because I'm still a fan of the album experience and having links from one song to the next, having great album sequencing. Like, I'm always going to be a huge fan of the product as a whole. So that's kind of, been hard to swallow, I would say. But apart from that, I just feel like the streaming era has kind of decreased the value of an album, also in a literal sense, because back then I was paying $10 for an album, and now I pay $10 every month for access to every album. So it's kind of made the listener not be more selective, but have that quick attention span of, let me skip songs more frequently. Let me start off an album and go on to another one because I'm not feeling it. There was more of a commitment when you played a CD.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Do you feel as if right now that's just the way that, new generation listeners and new people that have came into, let's say the music space and that have been consuming the music over the years enjoy listening to their music? Because I get that. I understand the whole concern of it. And listen,
it's more of a personal concern though for me. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's a concern for anyone else besides people like you and I.
Yeah.
Let's say the people that are watching this
Absolutely.
video. But I'm a massive fan of track sequencing. But I've gotten albums this year where the track sequencing is fantastic, but again, it all flows within, let's say the streaming area. So example, something like Dawn FM. Bro, the track sequencing on that album was phenomenal. The soundscape, the transitions in between tracks. So I think there's still artists that are doing it. I just think that there are certain albums that are getting approached in a certain way. But, you know, how has your attention span changed, let's say, as a music fan, now that the streaming era has kicked in? And, you know, do you find yourself looking for new music more often? Do you feel as if like you're not really sticking to new stuff as much because, you know, there's a lot of different stuff that goes in it? And, you know, we tackled this before on his Trap Music Dying, how like sometimes like, bro, like you're going through an album and you don't necessarily like feel like, okay, I need to take this whole album and put it in my pocket. You can take a couple out of there. So how do you feel about your attention span on track lists?
Well, listen, automatically with that whole philosophy of having this unlimited supply of projects and singles, it makes it much harder for me to actually live with a lot of these projects because at the swipe of a fingertip, I'm on from one project to the next. As in back then, again, I would have to be forced and locked into buying an album, listening to that album for, let's say, a whole car drive from track 1 to track 8 or however many tracks I can get through in that drive. And now it's different just because there's an abundance of projects and I'm constantly going from one to the next, and it's really hard to retain them in my rotation because of how much I have at my disposal, which I'm not complaining about. You know what I mean? I'll take all the music I can get, but it's hard to live with the music. It's sometimes also hard to allow that music to grow with you, just because you might hear something off of first listen and be like, oh, that shit was trash. I'm never fucking going back to this album ever again. And if I would have purchased the album as a CD, because I paid for that album specifically, I would probably have given it a second or third spin.
I have this to say too. Listen to this, all right? So I was going through some old vinyls at my uncle's crib the other day, and I was, you know, going through some stuff, and we used to play a lot of music, and I was listening to a lot of old, you know, beautiful presses, and the music quality and the experience behind that quality is completely different on the streaming services. And I mean, listen, I've listened to, you know, let's say audio files on Apple Music with the Dolby Atmos with mixing headphones, and it still does not compare than when I put on, you know, just a straight record on and listen to it. There's a different type of feel to it too, and I feel as if the streaming era has kind of cut the soul out of the music and has kind of, you know, made a disconnect to a certain point. Because even at that, like CDs, all right, my uncle has a beautiful sound system. Playing CDs on that is night and day in comparison to, let's say, you know, me playing it off of a mini speaker, or let's say me going in the car and putting in a CD and then me putting, you know, the aux cable through. I find like at certain points, like, I don't know if it's just me, I just prefer the experience of that. So do you think that's also been lost within this whole streaming era? Is just like that soulful feel, you know, that music brings through, let's say, different formats that have came out back then?
Yeah, 100%. And again, it goes back to that fact that, you know, streaming has given us so many opportunities to really be in control of what we're listening to, for how long we're listening to that music. And if you look at it, 35% of Spotify users will skip a song at that 30-second mark. And like you were saying, when you're enjoying a vinyl, you don't have, let's say, the luxury of skipping any tracks at all. Like, you have to be locked in.
My grandfather would slap me.
To a full side, bro. Yeah, literally, man. So it's interesting to see how it's affecting fans, just because there is a lot of pros. For example, I mean, being recommended music by Spotify, having mixes, curated playlists for you. Those are cool. But again, there's an issue with that because they're going towards your comfort zone. They're recommending you music that you're prone to like based on what you've listened to previously. So are they really putting you on to new sounds, different genres that you haven't explored?
I know that's a great conversation to be had. I feel as if that's also a great experience of going through music back then, was just like, you don't know what you're gonna get with a CD. Like, you don't know. You've made the commitment to have like a certain space in your room dedicated.
And let me ask you this: when you were buying CDs, did you ever just listen to that CD once?
Never.
And now in the streaming era, have you listened to albums just once? Yes.
Absolutely. But I think, okay, hold on. I've bought bad CDs where I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to revisit this, but it happens. I think it's because, dude, you've just fucking committed $10.
It's lying around in the car, bro. It's like, let me just give it another chance.
No.
You know?
Like, you got to put it like, I have certain CDs that I don't touch anymore, and I rarely touch my CDs depending on what I do, but it's different. I feel as if it's different for everyone, but let's go on to the artists, okay? Let's see.
This is interesting, bro.
This is very interesting because they're the creators. They're the ones that's giving us all of this beautiful material, and they're the ones that should be prioritized, because if we do not have them, we do not have this, we do not have a podcast. So let's talk about the artists, all right? Where do you think they fall, you know, in the conversation? Because There's a lot of different things that go into it. The way that they're getting paid by streaming services is absolutely fuck all if you actually go through the numbers, which we'll end up doing. And where do you think, the future lies for them, especially when, looking at creations and what they could do?
It's interesting just because I feel like with the boom of social media, it could be easy in a sense for an artist to have a viral moment and to build some steam off of a viral TikTok or whatever the case may be, but to have longevity within the game and to be able to compete with countless catalogs, that's super tough. And apart from that, I mean, I think it's definitely it's fucking with their artistic integrity a little bit. So I'll take you to an example of Baz, Dreamville signee, who recently tweeted, "I have an 11-song version of my next album. Very cohesive, minimal features, emotional, vulnerable, an all-time vibe. Then there's a 17-song version with the hits. Big features, algorithm-friendly, but a break in cohesion, a sacrifice in direction." And it just saddens me that we have to now think about music in the sense of, are they going to be algorithm friendly for 2022? Like, what the fuck does that even mean? It sounds like a robotic model.
Sounds like a dropshipping
for
website.
Music creation, bro. And it's like, it's fucking up people's artistic visions. And this is coming from someone like Baz, who's a very talented artist who has a range of vocal ability, and he's questioning himself because he does want to elevate his career. Who the fuck doesn't? But does he want to sacrifice the real music, the real heart and soul that he has to give in?
That's how many different artists do you think get stuck in that position where they have one version of the album that's gonna probably create another 15 years of, like, let's say, generational wealth, and then you have the other side that may do a bit less or may do significantly less, but they know is the blatant better product, and that's what's getting scary right now. That's what I think is getting fucking scary because, even if you look at the prices that, let's say...
Let's go through that.
This is fucking ridiculous, all right? So we're going to go through the prices that, these streaming platforms are paying artists, and it's really sad. So Spotify pays... Bro, what is even that decimal? It's 0.003 per stream. 333 streams equals to $1. Apple Music, 0.01.
1 cent.
1 cent. Then if you go onto YouTube Music...
And that, by the way, 100 streams would give you $1.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming in there. YouTube Music pays 0.002 per stream. 500 streams equals to $1. And then Tidal... I believe it's only 12 cents at that point. Yeah, 12 cents per stream, and then 12 streams equals $1, which is a much better payout. Much better payout than what the other people are going for.
And keep in mind that these artists are not seeing all of that because you have record labels involved, you have producers, you have all these royalty payments to everybody who has, their pockets open to receive the streaming revenue. So at the end of the day, I feel personally as a listener who consumes most of, if not all of his music through these fucking streaming platforms, I feel like I'm robbing these artists.
Yeah.
Like,
it feels bad. Okay, example. Let me ask you this then. Okay, let me ask you this. This is a great fucking conversation. Would you ever invest in an NFT for an artist album? Let's say Kendrick drops and he gives you the option. Okay, let's go to streaming services or here, certain amount for an NFT. What would you do? What would be your scenario there?
I would love to support artists through NFTs 100% just because you know that you're actually directly contributing to their growth and you're able to actually give them a considerable amount and pay for the art, pay a considerable amount because I like I said, I feel like I'm literally robbing artists. For example, let's say I were to listen to Lil Uzi Vert's Eternal Atake, all right? Let's say I would bump that album 40 times. I would stream the album from start to finish 40 times. I would be giving Lil Uzi Vert $2 fucking. That's how much they would get out of my 40 listens of an album. When you look at it in that light, it's like, my streams, what are they counting for?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that's a bigger conversation.
And how do you feel about the whole NFT game? Like, do you think that, obviously it's been very profitable for so many artists over the last year or so. So do you think that's going to be a new trend that really continues within this decade?
I hope it does. Listen, there's certain people that feel a different type of way about NFTs, but just from, let's say, a buyer standpoint, all right, we're not going to get into the business of it. you could really just see value out of that. Especially, let's say if the artist has special community perks around those drops. Let's say you're able to be in those exclusive discords and be able to talk to the artist about the drop. That's something that people will do to promote their NFTs.
Attend studio sessions sometimes.
Absolutely. Getting, let's say, a physical, let's say, copy or whatever it is, something that goes attached to it physically with a piece of art. Let's say collaborating with certain artists, put their work together. Like, I feel as if it's cool because listen, I'm going to access the music from the computer anyways. I'm listening to my shit digitally. I might as well have a different format from it, and it doesn't have to be that. And I also see a lot of different artists talking about this. Bro, you're technically renting music right now. You're technically not in ownership of what you're doing, because the stream is just, you're there. You're subscribed to the service. You don't necessarily own it anymore, and they're providing you, middlemaning that whole process. So it's also that. Imagine having a beautiful exclusive piece of art, just that an artist put in a lot of time for, and it's actually worth it. And that's where I think it's actually maybe going to go, because example, like someone like Mach-Hommy, he's built his whole career off of exclusive vinyls, and bro, like it has done so fucking well for him, and being exclusive like that now, I feel as if is the new wave. Like, people are realizing that I can make a certain type of money or a certain type of profit just from, let's say, being independent and going a certain type of route with my business. So that's what's nice too, is that I feel as if this whole conversation has kind of worked for artists in a certain sense, because people are finding ways. It's not, hope is not lost whatsoever. I feel as if there's going to be a beautiful wave that comes through it. And let me ask you, would you ever see a world in the future where, like, it's full of NFTs? It's full of, just like people really going hard on it.
It would be interesting, but I just feel like at the end of the day, the artist's goal is always going to be to have their music reach the masses. So I don't know if it's going to take full control over the way that we consume music, just because that exclusive factor does mean that not everybody can consume it, which is never ideal. Not only that, but it's always going to be on a leveled playing field, because you want to have your music available everywhere through these streaming platforms and through these different hosting platforms. But at the same time, you do want to have that exclusive feel to the music. And it's just interesting to see what the future holds, because for all we know, who knows what's going to come after streaming platforms, if there's going to be a new way to fucking consume music, and how that's going to affect the music consumption from the artist's point of view. But nonetheless, guys, it's a very interesting conversation. Let us know down in the comments if you think streaming is killing music in terms of the quality. It's always fun to hear from you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching the entire video. And we're doing conversations like this on a weekly basis, so please subscribe if you have not already. And if you guys are interested in coming to check out live album reactions with us on a weekly basis on our Patreon, check out the link in our description. We get to bump albums with the entire community, and it's always a good time. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.